enjoying this incredible momentum for our chamber since the beginning of this year. But today, especially, we're going to share with all of you a little bit of the history of how our chamber was founded, what was the intention behind the foundation of our chamber, and we will talk a little bit about some of the successes that we have had here in Central Florida, and maybe a little bit in the future of where we see our chamber as we continue to grow and our community here in Central Florida, our Hispanic community continues to grow. So today we have a very special guest, is someone that has been very important to our community in general, to our Hispanic business community, to many of our organizations. He has been a great leader, someone who has served in many capacities, but also has been a pillar, always thinking of how to support others, how to help other organizations for the greater good, not just for his own benefit. And I think that type of leadership is definitely what has helped our chamber become one of the largest and one of the best, not only here in Central Florida, but especially at the national level. So today I have the incredible pleasure of being here with Conrad Santiaqo. Conrad Santiaqo is a private wealth advisor with the Trenton Santiago Group, which is a private advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial. But Conrad Santiaqo is one of the founders of our chamber, and he was also the very first president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metro Orlando, that back then, when we first created the chamber, was called the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. So today we're just gonna share with you some information. Let's remember great things, but more importantly, let's talk about what helped us create this incredible chamber, what was in the mindset of our leaders, of our founders, and what is the legacy that they wanted to leave so we can all continue that legacy and continue to make this community so strong. So Conrad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It is a real pleasure to be here, especially in this occasion, which is, very, very important. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And the accolades too.
Oh, thank you. No, it's definitely very well deserved. Conrad has been so special to so many of us. But Conrad, we would like to make this more of a conversation,
Sure.
And bring people tell them the story of how the chamber was created. We have many of our members have joined us today. I'm sure they'll be sharing this, and please help us share this with your networks. But tell us a little bit about the chamber. How was the community back in 1993 when this chamber was? How was it? How was it compared to what it is today?
Well, back then we had the Latin Chamber of Commerce. And the Latin Chamber of Commerce mainly catered to Cubans. It was comprised mainly of Cuban members, although it did accept other Hispanics, And then the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce, which was mainly comprised of Puerto Ricans at that point in time. So before 1993, we started conversations about the possibility of joining forces. We started to recognize that working separately as two separate organizations, we didn't have the presence. We didn't have the united front, that stronger voice that we would have if we would merge, as one single organization, not only representing Puerto Ricans and Cubans, but all Hispanics. Okay? So after numerous meetings and conversations, that decision was made. It was actually brought to the board of each one of the organizations. The membership had to vote, as well, so it had to be approved by a majority of the members, not just the board. And that process was completed and was positive. And therefore, in 1993, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida, what is now the Hispanic Chamber of Metro Orlando, was formed at that time. And of course, in my case specifically, I was treasurer of the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce and part of the committee that was in charge of sort of having those conversations and leading to that merge. And then I was elected to be the first chair of the board, for the newly created chamber at that time.
And was that an easy process?
It wasn't. It wasn't because, as any type of process and change, and you have people that think differently, which is perfectly fine. And it was not necessarily well accepted, the notion of working together. Back then more so than now, I think the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans, some people were with the mentality of working separately and, we need to work together as Puerto Ricans or as Cubans or whatever the case may be. And, but we overcame those. I think a dialogue, understanding the importance of combining the chambers, having the vision of that would, what that would result, that we have seen actually in real life, being able to be a greater influence to politicians, government, the private sector, everything that just transpired after that is really what led to people to overcome those differences and finally, accept the fact that we did in fact work better together as a one chamber.
And what were some of the key conversations that you had at the very beginning with that original board, especially when you had people with different, even though Hispanics, we're all a family, we're a big family, but as big families, we also have, as you mentioned, our differences. Sometimes it's challenging, right? When we take apart, when we don't make our nationalities the highlight, and when now we become part of one group versus highlighting our specific country. So once you overcame that, what were the type of conversations that you were having at the very early ages of or stages of the chamber to set the tone and the foundation for this organization?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because more so than the conversations that we had is how the community reacted to that, And I say that because when we were divided, when we were two different chambers, most of the politicians, even community leaders from the private sector, they didn't really want to support entirely one or the other because they were concerned that the other organization would be offended. Once we became one chamber, all the people in political positions, in the government position, in the private sector, they started to come to us. Now we became an organization with respect. There was no concern about offending anyone. And, not, I'm not going to support you, but not you and that type of thing. But, the community embraced us. That's really what led us to be successful early on, because then the decisions were easier made, just because of that tremendous amount of support that we received from the community. And I would say one thing, if it wasn't because we came together, we would have never been able to establish Prospera, because of that, Linda Champion, the mayor at that point in time, because of that, she approached, the chamber to create a fund to help Hispanics grow.
And now that you mentioned Prospera, for those of you who don't know the organization, Prospera originally was the Hispanic Business Initiative Fund. It's still the legal name, but now to make it easier and for people to be able to connect more with the organization, they changed the name to Prospera. It's our sister organization. And I think that's one of the greatest success of the chamber, that it was being able to establish that program, and you were one of the founders as well. So if you can share a little bit more of what was the intention behind Prospera back then, as I mentioned, HBIF, and how that helped our chamber became also another pillar in our community.
Right. So I say that because Linda Chapin, the then mayor, county chair at that point in time, she had what she labeled as her Plan 2000, which was a plan to help minorities, excel and grow. And her vision was to create a lending program. Okay, and because again, it was one chamber, and she noticed, they had great leadership. Leaders from both organizations at that time came together. She challenged the chamber to create that, lending program at that point in time. We did research nationwide and discovered that most lending programs in the nation of that nature directed at minorities failed. If it wasn't because they were tied to a technical assistance program.
That's right.
So we came back to her and said, instead of doing a lending program, let's do a technical assistance program that, if we do have a need for capital in the future, could lead to a lending program as well. So she accepted, a recommendation, and then funding to create the Hispanic Business Initiative Fund, which is now Prospera. And it started with $60,000
Wow.
from the county and $40,000 from the city, because then we had
Incredible.
to sell the pitch to the city, and they agreed. So the initial funding was $100,000.
100,000, incredible. And it was managed by the chamber, or it was, we created a
We
different.
created its own board initially. So
Mhm.
most came from the Hispanic Chamber, because of how it was formed. But it was formed as a separate entity altogether.
And today, Prospera is one of the largest technical support organizations, business technical support. They have presence in 3 different states,
Yeah,
Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia.
correct.
And it's impressive to see how, again, when the people come together to bring something that is not about the individual, it's about the community. Again, it's not about one nationality, it's about the entire community and how can we serve everyone. It really develops something that it will have a life of its own, and it's going to grow
Sure.
organically. But of course, there's a lot of work behind it and a lot of people who dedicated many, many years. And talking about people dedicating time and talents and treasures, we didn't have the chamber. I know the chamber had staff, full-time staff, maybe by 1995, 1996 is around the time that the chamber was able to hire an administrative assistant and then somebody to run kind of the chamber business. But the leadership maintained as volunteers for several years. So how was that? How were those first 5, 6, 7 years where the group needed to be the one in charge of setting the vision and the plans for the chamber?
Sure. I mean, very challenging from that point of view, just because you said it right, we didn't have staff, so all the work had to be done by the volunteers. So it was not like you could direct someone, hey, we need to do this, you take care of it. But you need to do this, then you need to do this.
Yep.
And do it. So, but nevertheless, it was, that was not really necessarily an impediment. The excitement of coming together, the excitement of the impact that we were having in the community, of starting to create meaningful events, attain meaningful objectives, really provide access to Hispanic owners, to not only leaders in the community, but also leaders in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
All of that just started to flow very well. And that excitement, those type of accomplishments, overcame any other things that we had to do, even if we didn't have the staff to do it. So,
what were the first major events that the chamber put together that you started seeing that people reacted very well to them and started bringing more people together?
Sure. So we had the business after hours that we continue to have now. At that time, we created the Hispanic Business Expo, which we no longer necessarily do, but that became a very large event. And of course, Don Quixote was born out of the efforts early on of those times, as well. The concept was to create something different, something that was not a typical gala, and I think that concept has carried over all these years because it's such a special and unique event, even today, that I think the original intent is preserved, entirely. But yeah, those are some of the major events that started back then that are still, again, the Expo is no longer the case, but that has evolved into different things. And that's important. The important thing about the chamber is that it hasn't really stayed, doing the same thing. It has really evolved, has done very well, adapted and anticipated the changes that needed to be made to be able to serve even better the Hispanic community now, as it is today.
And we now see the chamber as this big institution. We're very recognized in our community because of the events. Don Quixote has become one of the main events, not only here in Central Florida, but we have also received recognition, even at national level, for the quality of the event. It's hosted inside of Epcot Center when it started with 250 people at the Orlando Museum of Art. So 25 years of that evolution of the events. But I would like to know, Conrad, 30 years ago, you were a very young entrepreneur. You had small kids. I think your oldest son had probably like 3 years old or around that age, right? Your wife also very, very young. So you were like, you, of course, I mean, as we go and we grow and we mature in our professional lives, we gain that wisdom. But at that moment, I mean, you were very young, as I'm sure you're still very young, but you were a teenager, let's put it that way. But you were in that stage where you were growing in your career, you were starting your own business. I'm sure that many of the founders of the chamber were also in the early stages of really developing their name in their different fields. So how was that experience for Conrad as you dedicated so much time and effort to the development of this chamber?
Well, I mean, to start, it was thanks to a great spouse and wife that I have in Joanne, because without, having a good team, a duo like that is almost impossible. Because you're right, when you're a young professional trying to develop, in my case, a financial planning practice, having small kids and being able to spend time with them and, do the whole weekend thing about the sports and all of that type of thing. And at the same time, be a good spouse and all that, and dedicate time to the community. But, everything fell into place, and again, I think when you give back to the community, that adds fuel to, energy, motivation, seeing how others can do good, and being able to be in a position to help them. It is, are things that has always motivated me, and that's just, part of it. But I mean, it's challenging to some extent, but at the same time, it's exciting. And, I was as excited back then as I am still now about the mission and what the chamber is doing nowadays and the impact that it has in the community.
And as I've been reading some articles from back then in 1993, 94, 95, it really caught my attention how it was so important and it was such a top priority to start paving that way for diverse business owners, for particularly Hispanic business owners, to be able to get contracts with private and public institutions. And like we talk a lot about that today, we have very strong programs. We have supply diversity. We do capacity building academies. We're constantly connecting all of our trustees with our members so they can do more business with them. But back then, again, our community was very small. We didn't have as many mature businesses, meaning that right now we can enjoy of many companies that were developed back then that now have 25, 30 years of experience. And of course, they have grown in a very healthy way. But back then, most of the businesses were probably startups. So how was that vision of helping Hispanic-owned businesses grow in a sustainable way to be able to gain that access to those contracts?
And you hit it right on the target. When we merged both chambers, the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce may have about 120 members and the Latin about 60.
Wow.
So the chamber was about 180, and maybe the numbers are off a little bit, but just about that. And you're right, the businesses in the community were more simple, mom and pop type of operations, nothing really too complex or high level. I mean, for the most part, of course. But, recognizing again, we knew at that point in time that the community was growing, that Central Florida was going to continue to be a magnet for Hispanics to relocate here. And that could be very, very visible. You can see how the community was changing, by the day, by the year, you name it any way you want to. And so as we came together and we started how businesses started to evolve, actually some of the early members were starting to get contracts through the minority program back then. And they actually were able to get very significant and large contracts. So we started seeing some success, in times that that wasn't necessarily the case. So over time, more of that then started to happen. like anything else, we evolved as a community, as a Hispanic business community, and nowadays, we have very sophisticated own type of Hispanic businesses, and it goes from high level to simple, but there is so much going on. But it's sort of an evolution, and I mean I cannot understate how much the Hispanic Chamber had an impact in really leading an effort, because without that representation, without that push, from the Hispanic Chamber, we wouldn't be here today for sure. The impact on the economic impact that the chamber have had, through access to, large corporations, through the contracts that they offer, through the minority programs, even forget the minority programs, just access to talking to, people with leadership in the private sector, the government sector. I mean, that alone, has been the catalyst for many businesses to be able to, grow and get business and do well. And when a business does well, that translates into, better education for children,
More
financial
jobs.
success that leads to, happiness, or more moments of happiness in the marriage and, in work and
Quality of life, though.
it's all
as
part
well.
of it.
Absolutely.
It leads to, more stable families and all of the above. So the implications are, enormous.
And Conrad, I've been very blessed to be part of this chamber. I started as a volunteer, then I've been employed. I think I have served in many different capacities with the chamber, but something that I have seen that is very consistent is the importance. Yes, we do celebrate the networkings, we celebrate the gatherings of that social aspects, especially for us Hispanics and for any human. It's important to feel that sense of belonging, and I think the chamber has been very important in bringing people together. But I think what you were mentioning earlier, that technical focusing efforts and also providing that technical support for businesses, because when we look at the numbers, yes, we have a very successful community. We are at the national level, we're one of the best places to open small businesses. Orlando is one of the best places to open and grow their businesses for any group. However, although we see so many Hispanic-owned businesses, and I'm going to focus on Central Florida, but I think this also happens at the national level, we see that I don't think Hispanics have a problem opening the business. Where we have challenges is scaling up the business, which means creating jobs, which means really growing the company, where now we're doing less than $1 million contracts to now be able to break that limitation, right? So what would be, in your experience, I mean, not only you've been an incredible leader for both organizations, and you have been behind a lot of the strategies and a lot of the vision to help other businesses and in your own practice, what would be your recommendation today after everything that we have experienced, especially here in Central Florida? What is your recommendation for those members, Hispanic-owned businesses who are maybe in their early stages of opening and expanding their businesses? What are your main recommendations so they can be as successful as you have, and so they can have a foundation as the chamber? Because the chamber, even though it's a nonprofit, is still, in essence, it's also run as a business. So what would be your recommendations to those members who are joining us?
I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but one of the things that perhaps helped me at some point in time, that now has a more formal name, is to gather yourself with other people who are successful, and that perhaps they do not think alike, or they don't think like you. Nowadays, they call that, forming an advisory board to the business, and that's typically done by, people that they appreciate who you are, people who like you. You don't pay them anything; they do it just because they want to help. But they do value and appreciate the opportunity to be part of a group to assist the business. And, I've seen that implemented by numerous businesses, small businesses, very successfully and very effectively. And I don't see enough of it out there. So, because that allows a small business to be able to take it to the next level, because a lot of it is more coaching than and really not, knowing what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get surrounded by people who can actually guide you and advise you, that typically helps tremendously.
And who do you recommend those people should be? Because we know, and I will say mainly in our Hispanic community, I've heard so many times that somebody's opening a business, someone is, I'm going to use restaurants as an example. Someone is opening a restaurant, but when they need to do the permitting to open the restaurant or the general contractor to build something in the restaurant, they go to the uncle, to the cousin, to the brother. And sometimes, I'm not going to say always, but sometimes instead of that being an advantage, it actually creates issues because maybe the person within the family group may not be the best qualified for that position, but we try to keep everything within our family. So as we have people joining us and listening to this conversation, what would be that group? Who should be the people that we need to look at as advisors for our
Sure.
business?
Yeah, and you hit a good point. There are things that are a bit technical in nature, like, the licensing, permitting, and things of that nature. Typically, an advisory group would not fulfill those functions. They would be more of at a strategic level, more of a, allowing the person to think in a different way or reaffirm, strategies or ways to grow the business at a high level that he or she may be thinking about, but is not certain of.
Mm-hmm.
So the advisory board will actually have more with that. But for the technical and the stuff that needs to happen just to, form the business and be compliant and all that, is better to go to either organizations or professionals that specialize in that
Mm-hmm.
than, a family member or friend who, although they may want to help,
Yes.
they may not have the skills or the knowledge to be able to do so effectively, and creates more issues or challenges than otherwise. So,
Absolutely. And another thing that I think, at least in my personal experience, I have really enjoyed seeing in the chamber is how so many people who started this chamber, and I don't want to mention other names because I know I'm not gonna be able to mention all of them. I don't want anyone to get offended, but we have been recognizing all of you, and we will continue to be recognizing all the founders and so many other great leaders. But how one of the things that I have really enjoyed is to see that you worked really hard 30 years ago. You came together, you became the foundation, you became the workers behind the chamber to develop it. But now, 30 years later, actually this is for both organizations, many of you are still very involved. And I think that having that type of support, the legacy involved, maybe you're not as involved, maybe you're not necessarily planning the day-to-day of the chamber, but you're still giving back to the community through the chamber and Prospera. So why do you do that? Why are you still involved, even when people could say he already paid his dues, he already served the chamber. Why are you still involved?
I hope it's 30 years more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we too.
No, I mean, you said it in a different way that I think about it. It's not really paying the dues. It's more getting back. I mean, I think the chamber, and even for that matter, Prospera, they give us, I say give us, because I think of all the people, that have been involved throughout the years and are still involved, and this has been a team effort. There's so much talent that we have in this community, generally speaking, but certainly in the Hispanic community. I think is what you give to us that what fuels that energy, that continuation of support. And I think we gain more out of being involved and being able to support it and be part of it than otherwise. And that's basically the simple answer to that. But I mean, I understand when you say pay your dues, but I don't certainly don't say it like that. I think it's really a pleasure just to get be able to be part of this. And the chamber is just scratching the surface of where it's heading. There is a lot more growth. There is a lot more to be done, and being able to be part of that is exciting.
Well, that's a good segue. Where do you see the chamber? How if you had a right now, I don't know, a crystal ball and you get to predict where do you see the chamber 10, 20, 30 years from now? What would that be?
Well, the obvious answer or response would be growth. But growth is not necessarily the key element of success. It will continue to grow just because we're growing as a community. And certainly the Hispanic side of the community is growing leaps and bounds. So that will certainly support the growth of the chamber. But what I think is even more important is the greater impact that it will have in terms of being a stronger voice, in the community, influencing decision making in the community for the better, granting even more access to businesses, to opportunities at all levels, both the private sector and government. A lot of what we do today, but even more and even more effective. And just like we evolved from 30 years back, the chamber of today may not necessarily be the chamber of tomorrow as it relates to how we necessarily look, but in terms of the objective and intent and the mission and the vision, all of that would still be the same.
And Conrad, one of the things that we have been very true to that legacy, to that foundation that all of you created is, and you mentioned it throughout the conversation, our pillars right now are commerce, coaching, and community development. Of course, commerce, we want people to not only have access to a broader network of potential business and clients and relationships, but we want to develop and strengthen their business so they can have more access to contracts that we were saying earlier. So that has many different layers. But then we were talking about the coaching, right? I mean, it's not just what the support that you get within your family, it's also the support that you get from organizations like Prospera. We also here part of the National Entrepreneur Center that not only offers Prospera support, but we have many other resources that through the chamber, we want to connect them to the different business owners in our community. But then the third one is community building, community involvement, and community development. So it's that sense of community. And I think that going back to what you all did back in 1993 and before 1993 of having those conversations, maybe back then that unity came in form of bringing together the Cuban community and the Puerto Rican community. But I think that today it goes way beyond that because today, although yes, Puerto Rican community is the largest, we have a very strong and very prominent Cuban community here, but we have a lot of people from South America, Mexico, Central America, Venezuela. But not only that, not only we all have to come together and become one voice together, but we also are members of a community that has members of many other nationalities and members who have other cultures and other backgrounds and other ideas. But at the end, we're all being together. And one of the things that we see the chamber, you mentioned it when it comes to creating more influence and impacting decision makers, and even being the decision makers. For us as the chamber is also remembering that our responsibility now as we move forward, and as we become right now, our community is about 30% of the entire population. Eventually, it will be the largest minority. It is right now, and it will be probably the majority, right?
Sure.
So as we go to that point, I think that we see it as a responsibility at the chamber to develop the businesses and the leaders and the decision makers that are going to be impacting things, not just for Hispanics, not just for Puerto Ricans, Colombians, Venezuelans, or Cubans, or any nationality as its own. It's how we're going to be impacting everything for everyone in our community here in Central Florida. Another thing that I think is fascinating is Florida has a plan to become one of the largest global economies. Right now is the 16th. If the state of Florida would be a country, we will be the 16th largest global economy in the world, globally. And now we want to become the 10th largest by 2030. So we see it now also as a responsibility to what's going to be the role of Hispanic businesses and Hispanic leaders to push that and to be part of that growth that, again, is going to impact everyone. So I wanted to share, I know you have been very involved in many of these conversations. I'm not saying something new to you, but we definitely want our our members to, and everyone who's joining us today, to kind of also learn that again, the legacy that you have built for our chamber and for Prospera, now we see it as an opportunity to take it even at a different level, to that it will benefit all of us, right, as we
Sure.
continue to grow.
Yeah, and the point that you make there is very important, and that's what I was saying, that the chamber of today would be very different, of what the chamber would be in the future. And when you get involved in organizations such as the Hispanic Chamber, whether it's a board or a committee, that allows you to have the opportunity to interact with other people. Oftentimes people, at least from my perspective, that were smarter than me, and gain from them. But that's how you gain so much value, so much information, that allows you to then think through what those opportunities may be in the future, and put your company, yourself in a position to be able to be part of that. So I've always thought that, giving back to the community is about, improving the community and being unselfish and helping others. But there's no question, and that's what I said before, it's not about paying dues. It's about really being able to also learn. And you learn so much when you interacted with people that are as successful or more than you, people who think different than you, people who have different types of businesses, professions, skills levels. I mean, there's so much out there. And if you're a sponge and if you are receptive to improving yourself and all that, that leads to being able to be in a position to take advantage of those, new industries or upcoming industries or whatever you want to call it, or being part of the global economy.
Correct.
All of the above, because, the world is changing by the day. So.
And Conrad, now as we're getting closer to the end of our conversation, I don't know if we have, I'm going to look at Alejandra, if she can give me some notes, if I didn't open my application here to get some of the questions that we might be getting. But as we're getting closer to celebrate this big milestone at the Dr. Phillips Performing Center, at one of the venues that is probably considered one of the best of its kind, not only in the at the national level, but globally. How does it feel for you? Again, you have experienced the chamber since it was just an idea, and now you have experienced Don Quixote, and you have experienced, now we're about to experience, again, the celebration with the Ignite Luncheon. That used to be the installation luncheon. Now we change it to the Ignite Luncheon. How does it feel? How Conrad feels with what is happening today with the chamber and with our Hispanic community?
It feels great. Very special, especially being able to be part of all this. And it reaffirms the vision that we had, not that we exactly knew exactly what it was going to turn out to be, but it certainly has more than fulfilled the expectations that we had. And having talented people like you leading the organization internally, I mean, it's been a blessing for the organization, but that's also, good organizations attract good leadership, and it's just part of all that. And you have a great team, and just being part of it is, it's always been special, and it continues to be. And of course, when we reach this type of milestones of 30 years, it makes it a memorable moment and something, to remember.
And now that you mentioned that, Conrad, and thank you for those words, I was sharing with a group of people not too long ago that I remember when I just came, when I was very young, I was probably in high school, and with my mom and I came into this country, and I used to listen to, my mom actually used to listen to the radio station. Of course, I used to listen to it as well as she was selecting what stations we were listening to. But I remember hearing about the chamber, the establishment of the chamber, the intention behind it. And again, this is when it was very, very recent, very new. And that always, I remember that always inspired me, because it even though I didn't really know what that meant, I probably didn't even know exactly what the chamber was.
Sure.
But just noticing the leadership and people behind the effort and the passion behind it always really created something special within me that as I kept growing and when I had the opportunity to become a volunteer, I did it because not just because I wanted to volunteer at the chamber, it was because I was following that passion that I was able to sense through at that moment, not even because I met all of you in person, but at that moment through the media and the things that I was hearing in the different platforms. So I really, and it's interesting to see now moving forward, and I've been in this organization in one way or another for over 20 years, and now I see what I've been able to accomplish and what our team has been able to accomplish. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, we get many recognitions in many different ways, but it's in reality is the fruit of what all of you created and what all of you really gave us as a gift, because it's not just an opportunity, a great professional development opportunity. This is something that is labor of love, and it's something that it really, I feel it personally, and I know Augusto, I always like, Augusto has been a great mentor. Augusto is the president of Prospera. I think for both of us, we feel very honored that we have been able to continue that legacy through this great organization. So I just want to say, thank you, because everything that you did, and maybe at that point you didn't know how many people you were impacting, even when we were teenagers, that impact has now had hopefully very good fruits. And that's my hope, that now with the new team that we have and the younger generations, hopefully we want to pass along that legacy that you left all of us. I want to make sure that you knew that.
Thank you for the kind words, but it's not a me thing. It's a group of people, and I was just part of it.
Thank you. And I think we have a couple of questions, Conrad, before we finish. Very good. If you could describe your experience at the chamber in one word, what would that be?
I mean, back then I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Or your experience in the chamber. Yes, either back then or today. What would that be?
I would say memorable.
Memorable.
Yeah. It's always that's going to be part of my life.
Yes.
And it's in the DNA, as we say it. So that's the simple word I would use to describe it.
No, that's true. For those who have not joined the chamber, or maybe right now people have so many options, either digitally or so many different organizations, what recommendation would you give those who maybe are just learning about the chamber or have not joined the chamber yet? Why is it important for them to join?
Mm-hmm. I think during that conversation, we described it very well, but it's really being able to be in a position to access information that is relevant for today and the future, access key constituents in the community, access opportunities, business opportunities, interact with other people, business owners who are successful, those who may be facing challenges. Some challenges may be the same ones as you may or not be facing, and that helps, when you bring people together to talk about those. All of the above, it's just the opportunity to meet just other people, within the Hispanic community. But one of the things that I always heard from even Anglos say is that they were able to access key people in the community through the Hispanic chamber easier than otherwise.
Yes.
The chamber was certainly a very good conduit to be able to reach out to people in key positions in this community.
Thank you. And it's true. And we invite everyone who has not joined the chamber yet. Definitely take advantage of these opportunities. The chamber is a great connector for all of you with different resources. It doesn't matter which state your business or stage your business is at this moment. There's something that I know the chamber will be able to help you with. And as I mentioned earlier, we're very blessed that we have our past leaders, our founders. You're still a leader, so I'm not going to call you a past, but someone who has been involved with us for so many years and who's still so committed to our chamber. So any final words?
Well, I hope this information has, this conversation has been good information for those listening. And if you haven't joined the chamber, join it. You're missing out on a great opportunity. So again, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Conrad, thank you so much for being here today, for the conversation, but most importantly for, as I mentioned earlier, the legacy that you have gifted us, and your vision and your passion for the organization, and your incredible leadership to our community. And for those of you who are watching, once again, thank you for joining us. Please share this video. Again, we want people to be proud of this organization, because it's not just about one person or the person who's leading or the staff member who's participating in the chamber. This is about all of us. This chamber is a representation, it's the voice of all our Hispanic businesses here in Central Florida. So it's your chamber. We are you. We are representing you. And that is our goal with all these conversations, and to really be able to bring the best of our entire community, especially through the service and commitment of the Hispanic business community. So hopefully we'll see many of you at the Ignite Luncheon, which will be taking place on May 10th at the Dr. Phillips Performing Center, which is going to be particularly at the Stamens Hall, which is one of the most beautiful but also more advanced music halls in the nation, and hopefully also at the worldwide. Is one of the most beautiful places to have events. And we're very proud that now we're going to be able to bring the very first Hispanic event that is going to be held at the Stamens Hall. Will be one held by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So we hope to see you there. Again, this celebration is for all of us, and it will be fun. Promise we're going to have great music, great food, but most importantly, we'll be celebrating the legacy of our founders, of our leaders, and of course, of every single one of you who has been part of the development of our Hispanic community here in Central Florida. So thank you for joining us.